Hi, this is Andy. I'm the prop chef here at Two Perspective Studio. Today I'm going to show you how to set up and create a realistic fake cherry pie using not too many ingredients. It's actually not that difficult, and you can make a variety of pies using the same method, just altering your filling and your color just a little bit. So the first thing you're going to need is a fairly sturdy 9-inch is what I'm using. This is a 9-inch pie pan. It is foil, but it is the heavy duty one, so it's fairly sturdy, because when all is said and done, this is going to be almost as heavy as a real cherry pie. And if you've ever lifted a real cherry pie, you know that its contents and filling and crust and everything, it's got a little bit of weight to it. So you want something that's not going to bend and fold in as you're working with it. Then you're going to need, and there's a couple of ways you can do the base to this. I like using plaster of Paris for mine because it will provide a very sturdy base for this pie, or any pie that you're going to do. You can also fill part of your area because you need to fill the base. This isn't real food. You don't want to waste a lot of ingredients. You want to use something cheap to fill the void where it's not going to be seen. Then on top you'll have all the pretty stuff that looks realistic. So you can use, like I said, a variety of things to fill the void of the base of this. You can use something like plaster of Paris. You can use regular clay, like this is a Model Magic clay. There is foam clay. Very inexpensive ingredients to fill a void. Now what you're going to want to do is fill about half this pie pan up with some kind of voided material. You can even use a styrofoam disc if you want, and then just either cut it to size, or you'll have to make sure that it's sealed to the edges of the pan itself, because to finish this cherry pie you're going to be pouring a liquid on top of it. I use resin. You can also use other materials that dry sort of shiny, that make it look like a real cherry pie, like the syrup that makes itself when you cook a pie. So there's different ways of doing it. Today I'm just going to show you the way that I do it most often. I do change it up from time to time depending on the type of pie and just the outcome that I want to achieve. But today we're going to be using the plaster of Paris for the base, and then we'll be making our crust out of this Model Magic clay. So you'll need a decent sized bowl. This one's actually, I think, a 20-ounce paper bowl. Make sure that after you mix your plaster of Paris, you wash it in an area that does not go down your sink. Plaster of Paris can damage pipes, so be careful of that. Either wash it outside, or I use these disposable bowls so that I can just throw them away and I don't have to worry about damaging my pipes. Now it takes a decent amount. Like I said, this is a 20-ounce bowl that I'm using here. Plaster of Paris is a fairly forgiving thing to work with. I don't measure too often with this. There are instructions on the back on how to make this. If you want to read that and measure out, that is totally fine. I've done this so many times, I know what it looks like, so I just kind of mix it myself. I use plastic reusable spatulas and things to mix these with, so that I can just wipe them off or rinse them with a little bit of water. You can also use popsicle sticks or silicone spoons. And like I said, I'm not measuring this on camera. I've done this so many times, I kind of know what it's supposed to look like. But this is a rather forgiving material, so if you happen to put just a little bit too much water or not enough water in it, it's still going to get the job done. This is sort of like, almost like mixing cement. You want to make sure that you're scraping down to the bottom of the bowl. Make sure that you get all that powder mixed up in here. And once you get it wet, you need to sort of really stir it around decently and make sure that you scrape the bottom of the bowl. When you get it going and mixed in, it sort of has the consistency of pudding, instant pudding mix. That's about what you want to see here. You want to get most of the lumps out if you can. Doesn't have to be super smooth because it's not going to be visible in your pie pan. This is all just underneath. It'll sturdy up the pan and fill the void. So that's pretty smooth. So that's about what you want. Put my water back here. I'm just going to take my pie pan, take my mixture. Now this does set up very quickly. In about 20 to 30 minutes, this will be hard. So you have to work quickly with it. See how smooth that is now? So all we're going to do is pour that into our pie pan. And like I said, I want it to take up about half the space. And I'll smooth that out just a little bit. I'm going to set this aside and I'm going to let this dry for about 30 minutes until it's hard, and then we can continue on with the rest of the project. So as my plaster of Paris was drying in my pie pan, I took some time to begin conditioning my Model Magic clay, which is the one that I prefer to use for pie crusts. You can find Model Magic, this is by the Crayola company. You can find Model Magic in the craft stores, online, lots of different places sell it. Comes in various packaging weights and things. For each pie, I'm going to do a lattice crust on this cherry pie. For the lattice crust and the rim of the crust, which is like where it goes around the top, you'll need about 6 ounces of Model Magic. If you're using a foam clay, which you certainly can, and they sell that lots of different places as well, foam clay has a little bit more shrinkage when it dries than the Model Magic. So you may want to go with 7 or 8 ounces if you're using foam clay, and just make it a little bit thicker so that when it does shrink, it doesn't go past the area in the pie pan that would look realistic. So either one is totally suitable. But just make sure that if you're using the foam clay, you use just a little bit more, make it a little bit thicker to account for the shrinkage. Model Magic does shrink slightly, but not much at all. And the way that I do these, it really doesn't matter. You want to make sure if you're using the Model Magic that you take, for an 8-ounce package, which is what this is, you'll need about 6 ounces for the pie. I condition the whole thing at once, the whole bag at once, and then whatever I don't use, I store in Ziploc bags, and it's already been conditioned. So when I take it back out, all I have to do is knead it just a little bit to sort of warm it up. You see how that just snapped? That is not conditioned enough. It takes about 10 minutes of kneading and pulling the clay to get it to where it stretches like taffy and doesn't snap in half. If it's still snapping, you can get cracking. Snapping means cracking. So you want to make sure that you pull this to where you have like a taffy stretch going on. That's when you know it's ready. It's warmed up, it's very pliable, and you want to make sure that you do that a lot with this Model Magic. It's a little hard on the hands, but you get used to it after a while. So I usually take my 8 ounces and sort of chop it in half and do, just because I have arthritis in my hands. So I do half a pack. I need half a pack at a time. It's a little easier. If you have strong hands, then you'll be able to do the whole thing at once. So I know I'm not going to need all of this, so I'm just going to set this aside for just a second. I'm going to do the lattice piece first. I think I'll use, this looks like I might have just a little bit more in it, so I'm going to use this section for the lattice work. Now what I did, once my plaster of Paris was hard, I took what I'm using for my fake cherries. Now these are a fake dried berry that I purchase from a supply house. You don't have to use anything like this for your cherry pie. You can use a foam clay or the Model Magic. Just roll it into various size little balls like cherries. All you would have to do is roll it in your hands like this. Make several different sizes. Lay them all out on a sheet of parchment paper or wax paper and paint them. Take some deep red colored paint. Let them dry first, of course. Let them dry overnight, and then you can paint them. When the paint is dry, you can set them all in your pie pan. You'll have various sizes, just like real cherries. You can also use a red foam clay. You don't have to do anything to it. Red foam clay, lots of people manufacture it. I have some here that I don't know whose this was. Honestly, I have a lot of different people's clays. This was a red foam clay. All you have to do is, now this actually has been toned down with a little bit of orange because I made something else out of this. But a nice red foam clay is all you need, and make little balls and put them right on there and you're good to go. Nobody is going to know the difference once it's all done. So either way, like I said, I do buy my berries, but I sell my pies, so they have to be ultra realistic. I also scent my pies so they smell like actual cherry pie. But I am a seller, so I have to go that notch above. If you're just making this for a home craft and you just want something very realistic but not ultra realistic, you can go with something a lot less expensive than purchasing berries. So I am shaping and pushing down at the same time on my Model Magic. I want to get all the little creases out of it. I want it to be as smooth as possible before I start rolling. This is going to be used for our lattice crust. I'm starting with a sort of a rectangle, and I'm going to start, this is a clay roller. It's acrylic. It does not stick to the Model Magic. You can use a wooden rolling pin. Sometimes it sticks. A marble one works fine. This is a marble surface or tile surface that I work on here, so it does not stick to any of that. It does not stick to these acrylic rollers. You can get these in the baking section of any craft store. They come in various sizes. It's a little more difficult than rolling pastry dough because this is a thicker clay product. You want to make sure as you're rolling this that you're sort of pushing down and pulling at the same time. You want to make sure that you dispense any air bubbles that are in here, which can also cause cracking in your clay. Not clacking in your clay. So you just want to get this rolled out to where, like if you were going to put a pie crust in your pie pan, you make it a little bit bigger. Now this is going to be for the top lattice crust, so it doesn't have to be much bigger because I take the other clay and make a rope and rim the top of it. And I do that just to seal it all together. And that's obviously not the way that you have to do it, but I'm just showing you my technique. So I have an X-Acto knife, and I'm going to take this piece and sort of square it off a little bit. So now I have sort of like a fake pastry square. I'm going to keep on using this, I think. Now, you can see when I hold the pie pan over the top of it, my pastry square is covering the whole thing. It's about the same size, and that's what you want. So what I'm going to do is the same thing that you would do if you were making this out of real pie crust. I'm just going to start slicing and making our strips of fake pastry. You can do this with a decorative roller if you want decorative edges on here. You could also do a solid crust and cut out little shapes with a cookie cutter. There's lots of different ways that you can make these pie crusts. This is just how I make the lattice crust. So I have lots and lots of strips, more than I need for sure. You just sort of have to take your pie crust and judge how you want this to appear on here, if that makes sense. I'm going to put him over here so you can see him a little better. Now these are a little bit thick. They're probably at least a 1/4 inch, if not just a little bit more. I do that so that I can pull them and smooth out those edges just a little bit when I'm making the crust. So I will give each one a little pull. Then we need to figure out how many it's going to take for the top. Whichever ones are going to fit the best are the ones that I use. Typically it's about 5 in both directions. So you'll need 10 pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is what we have left. So we have our 10 pieces. Now I don't build on my pie because I want to paint it before I put it on the actual crust. I'm going to move my pie up top, and I'm going to put my 5 pieces back together the way that I had them. Then I'm going to create the lattice. I'm going to go in the other direction I'll start by laying this over the top of the end piece. Then I'll pick up the next piece, lay it over the top of the next piece, pick up the next piece, lay it over the top of the last piece. So we're going to repeat that with the rest of the lattice. So the next one will have to go underneath since this one went over the top. So I'll pick up from this end, lay it underneath, lay this down, and you need to make sure that you don't stick these together because this clay can be a little bit sticky. Foam clay is even stickier. And I just alternate back and forth over the top and underneath until you get to the end. Do the same with the next strip. This one, because this one was underneath, you're going to start the next one over the top. So over the top, underneath, over the top, underneath, and over the top on the end. And I give it a little press just to make sure that everything is adhering and it won't shift. So this one is over the top, this one's going to come underneath. Then over the top, underneath, over the top, underneath. So basically you're just alternating each one separate. Pretty easy once you get the hang of it. So this one will be over the top, under, over, under, over. And there we have our lattice topper. So I'm going to bring in my piece of parchment paper just to be able to paint on. And I'm going to lay that out. Now I use a color called raw sienna for most of my crusts. Sometimes I will start with a yellow ochre, especially for apple pie. I'll do an ochre base. Now these are paint colors that you can find in any craft store. Grab a piece of paper towel here. I'm using a large, very soft, flat brush. This one is a 1/2 inch flat. It's a very soft brush. I wet my brush, I have plenty of water in there, and I begin sort of taking some paint. I'll dab a little bit off on the paper towel just to make sure that there's not too much paint on there. And then with very light motions, I'll start to paint the crust. Now using a soft brush will give you the best result, especially with a wetter paint, because you won't get brush strokes. And you definitely don't want that on your crust because then it won't look like a realistic pie crust. You can tell that it's a painted crust. And you want to make sure that you get all the different crevices, all the sides. So I'm making sure my brush has lots of water in it. I have lots of water. Dab off just a little bit. Make sure it's not too much. You don't want to saturate your clay because then it'll take a lot longer for it to dry. And if you wet your clay too much, that can cause cracking as well. So there's lots of, clay is sort of finicky, so you have to follow the rules, play by the rules, and you'll have a great result in the end. This is also a little trial and error. You need to make sure, if it doesn't come out the best the first time, you can also take it apart and do it again. So don't get discouraged if it's not the exact look that you were going for the very first time, because usually you can pull your clay off and just start over again. Believe me, I've done it more times than I care to admit. And even though I've been doing the fake food for quite a while, I still make mistakes all the time. Lots of things don't come out. You know what they say, If at first you don't succeed, try again. It's a great saying in the crafting industry, because a lot of times it does not come out right the first time. And that's okay. Now I am not so much stroking the brush on here, I'm more pouncing. If you pounce, you also won't get those defined brush strokes. The pounce will make it look more like it's baked. You'll have a series of shades in your crust that you wouldn't get if you were just doing back and forth brush strokes. So the pounce technique, again with a soft brush, is your best bet here. You're also going to want to spin your parchment paper or whatever surface you're working on. Once you get done with this, you're going to want to spin it around to see that you've gotten in all these little crevices. All the sides need to be painted. And the only way to see that completely is to spin your crust and take a look on all sides. You'll need to do this once it's up on the pie shell as well. So I'm going to spin this around. Take a look here, and I see there's lots that I missed on this side. And I'll spin it some more. Put a little bit too much paint, not enough water on that one. I made this section just a little bit too dark. I'm going to have to go back and spread that out. So if that happens and you have this really dark area here, just sort of blob it back off with your paintbrush, and then just blend that extra paint into any lighter areas that you have that need a little touch-up. Again, using pouncing technique instead of brushing. I'd tell you to do this with an actual pouncing tool, but you wouldn't be able to get that underneath, and that's really what you need to make sure that you're doing, is getting all those side pieces in and underneath, because you don't want anything to show like it's unbaked after you put this on your crust. Okay, put that there for just a second. So there you have a nice baked looking crust. So I'm going to bring up my cherry pie here. Now you see these are hard in here. That plaster of Paris is cured. It is dry. It gave good stability to the pie pan. There's nothing moving here. So I'm gonna, normally I would let this dry completely before I handled it, but because we're on camera, I'm gonna go ahead and just pick this up. And I'm going to lay that over the top here. Position it just the way I want it to fall. And then I'm going to trim it. So you see I have a lot of overhang here. I'm going to go ahead and zip that off. Anywhere that's overhanging a lot, I'm just going to take those pieces off. And anything that's, because you want it to fit pretty decently. So put these aside. So I'm going to take the others that are a little large, and I'm just going to sort of fold and tuck them down into the pan, just so that it fits. Because you kind of want something for your upper crust rim to stick to. So you want something there, sort of like that. So then we're going to take some paint on my fingers, but that's all right. I'm going to take another section of crust, or clay. I'm going to move my pie up just a little. Now I already conditioned this. I need to make a long rope, and I know my tile is 24 inches wide. I know it takes just about 24 inches of the clay rope to go all the way around the rim of this 9-inch pie pan. So I'm just going to start rolling this out into a big snake, and I'm going to use my 24-inch tile to measure out what I need for the top. It does not need to be super thick. No more than a 1/2 inch. And that will allow you about this much. That will allow you enough to pinch like you would make a real pie crust. And I think I have a little too much clay here, but that's okay because I'll just take it off at the end. Use my little knife, cut off here. Now I have a 24-inch, 1/2 inch rope. I'm going to get some glue. You can use craft glue. I actually use a Gorilla Glue. Craft glue is just fine. Elmer's glue, anything like that. I just run a glue bead around the top of this pie pan. This is just to make sure that it's going to stick and stay while it's in the drying process. Now I take about the halfway mark and I start at the end of my pie rim, and I just give it a little push, just slightly. And I come around and I attach them. Sort of smooth that seam together. And then I give it a little press down all the way around, so it gets adhered to that glue. That's what we have so far. Now I'm going to make sort of a decorative little crust topper, and then we're going to use our leftover paint here, and we're going to paint that right on top. So I'm going to start where this little seam was. I press them together. Right here is the seam. I press them together and sort of smoothed them out. I'm going to take these two fingers and hold them like this, and then I'm going to take another finger, try one with a not so big a fingernail. You can use your thumb or your forefinger. What you're going to do is you're going to push down with these two, and with this one you're going to push down and out slightly so that you have like that. Then you're going to put your thumb in the indentation that you just made, make another squish and push again. Another squish and push again. And just keep squishing and pushing to form your little decorative crust. So you go in the last channel and make a new one, and you just keep going around the edge. Now you're pressing this clay down into that glue bead that you just put there. You're also flattening out the clay and getting it to stick to your lattice that you just put down. So in essence, you're sort of sealing all your clays together, and you're sealing it to the foil pan as well. So you just use this technique the whole way around until you come to the end. And there you have your little decorative crust. It's sealed to the lattice underneath, and everything is already set and in those channels. Now, your paint here should be dry before you do this, but to make it more realistic, I press down and get rid of any of those squared off edges. I want them to look more rounded and more natural. So I normally would not press in wet paint like this, but I'm just showing you what we do on camera, right? So I'm just going to push them all down to where they're a little more natural, a little less rigid looking. Like it's actual pie crust, because that's what we want it to look like. So now I have all those pressed down. Let me get a little bit of get this paint off my finger real quick. So I'm going to go back. I have a little bit of this paint left on my parchment paper. I put some more water on my brush. Then I'm just going to go back and forth all the way around this crust. And you need to make sure that you get on the inside as well. Trying not to paint the cherries that you've put on the inside. If you get any paint on there, it's easily fixable. You can wipe it off with a baby wipe or a wet paper towel. Or if it's dried on there and you can't get it off, you can always take a little dab of red paint and paint over the top of it. But you just want to go around and paint the rest of the crust. Same color as your lattice. And you need to make sure that you are running your paintbrush all down sort of in the underneath part where it lops over the pie crust. Run your brush under there so that you don't have any white showing after you're finished. Okay, so now that we have that done, all we need is some resin to make a cherry looking sauce to pour in there, and fill up those areas in there. Now for epoxy resin, this is going to take approximately 6 ounces of the resin that you're going to want to mix up. You're going to want to put a little red alcohol ink in it to make it match your cherry color, and then you'll pour it in the holes and you'll let that dry for 24 hours. So I'm going to go mix up some resin and I'll be right back. Okay, so I have mixed up my epoxy resin. This is a 2-part resin, equal parts A and B. This is available in lots of different places. I have used some red alcohol ink to make this a nice deep cherry color. You need to make sure that you mix your resin very well. I think they recommend about 3 minutes of mixing time. You need to make sure that you mix it thoroughly, or it can not set correctly or dry very tacky, and you definitely don't want that. Also recommend you wear face protection so that you're not smelling this. Gloves are definitely a must. A well ventilated area. There are other products that you can use to make the glossy finish in there. You can use a clear glue that has been tinted with food coloring or alcohol inks or anything like that. You can use a Mod Podge, glossy Mod Podge for this. Make sure that if you're using a product like that, that you put more plaster of Paris in your base so that you're not using as much. It will take longer for glue to dry. The epoxy resin dries in about 24 hours and cures in a few days. Let's see. So when I'm pouring the resin in the pie, I pour very slowly in the holes. The resin is a thick material. It's a thick substance, so you need to pour slowly and not overfill your cavities is the trick to this. Getting a little bit up on the crust is fine, especially on the edges. It actually makes it look a little more realistic because fruit pies tend to overfill on the edges and bubble up. So that'll give it a little more realistic look if you do have a little bit more on your edges. So I just go around pretty carefully. I try not to get it on the actual top of the lattice too much, especially like in a droplet form, because that would not look natural. And sometimes you'll pour in these little holes in here and it will sink down and just dissipate, and you'll have to go back over them several times. That's because there's so much space in between your cherries and your plaster. So like I said, you just want to pour slowly. And I go down in each hole. I don't skip any. And again, that'll make it look more realistic because your pies want to bake and bubble up in all the holes. So you need to sort of simulate what a real pie looks like. Looking at pictures of things before you start to build them is a great idea. I look at real food pictures quite a bit to get not only inspiration, but I get a better visual as to what they look like. So either I have the real food in front of me, or I'm looking at a very good picture before I start to try and make something fake. I try and get as realistic as I can, and photos are a great way to do that. Sorry, it's hard for me to talk when I'm pouring. Now, this is a little bit of a tedious process, and you have to be careful as you're going. If you do happen to get some on the top of the crust, make sure you take a little like plastic spatula or a popsicle stick and get it off as quick as you can, because if it's like a droplet, it's going to look like it doesn't belong there. Like there, I put a little droplet on there and it's going to look like it doesn't belong. So I'm going to have to get that off with a little popsicle stick. Now it's okay to overfill some of the chambers like that. Not sure if you can see that from the camera, but I overfilled it and it sort of ran down into the next one. That's totally natural when it comes to a cherry pie. Apple pies are the same way. Blueberry pies the same way. The fruit will bubble up and come up through those chambers and get a little bit on the crust. So you actually want that effect. And if you've ever made fruit pies, you know what I'm talking about. I'm having to go back through because I want this resin to end up even underneath. I want it to flow evenly. So I'll have to go back to the beginning areas and do them again if it's sunk down. Now see, on this edge over here, I'm going to pour it like it overfilled in the line like that. I'm going to come back over here and I think do the same thing. You definitely want some of the humps and bumps of whatever you use for your cherries. You definitely want those to show. So don't use so much resin that you cover up all of your cherries. I think I've just about got it. I think that looks pretty good. Okay. So the last thing that I'll do to this pie is I will use some fake sugar. It's actually made out of crushed glass and sometimes sand. I do sell those in my Etsy shop. If anyone is interested in purchasing any of these fake sugars, you certainly can. I will paint. I need to wait for this paint to dry and the resin to dry, but I will coat the pie with a glue like Mod Podge, and then I'll sprinkle this crushed glass over the top so it gives the appearance that has a sugared top on it. I only put that on the lattice work. I don't put it on the edge. But you can do whatever effect that you like with your pie. But that's about it to making a fake pie. I hope you'll try this. If you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments. Until then, I'll be back again with another how-to video on making fake food. Bye, everybody.